So recently, PC Gamer put out this list of the top 100 PC games of all time, and as they are the global authority on PC games, and I myself am a PC gamer, I figured I would check it out, and spoilers, it's bad. It's bad, but for some reasons that I think are... The reasons it's bad are more interesting, in my opinion, than the list itself. And I kind of want to use this video as a jumping off point to talk about the core problems, the fundamental issues with anything like this. IGN does the same sort of thing every once in a while. Every year or few years, they'll put out their own top 100 games list. And I think that that is just as bad and just as ill-conceived. But to start off, what are the main problems, I think, at a fundamental level with the idea of this list? And we can start by reading the second paragraph where they talk about the criteria. What does it mean to be one of the best games on PC? Is it the ones that stand out as important and influential with lasting legacies that make them timeless? Is it those that have attracted vibrant and creative communities who run with an original idea and turn it into something more than the sum of its parts? Is it the games we'd recommend today, a list of games that every PC gamer owes it to themselves to try out? Or is it just the games that we, the PC Gamer team, loves and want to celebrate with the world? Ultimately, the top 100 is all of these things, and so our scoring system has been designed to take them all into account. And this is where they go wrong. Something interesting is that this article starts out, and it just kind of assumes that the idea of a top 100 games list makes sense in the first place, and I think it's interesting, it never stops to ask, why would you make a list like this? What is the purpose? And ask this to yourself too. Think about this. What is the purpose of making a top 100 anything list? Is this a list of recommendations for you to go out and buy? Is this a list of things that you should play? Is this a list of things you should know about? These are all actually very different things. And when you look at the scoring system, it's such a weird scoring system. I'll break this down. Okay, so they have taken these 4 factors and made some kind of algorithm out of it. I have no idea. It's basically trying to take something that is very subjective and trying to apply math to it to make it objective. And I think it is more self-defeating than the list. So we have quality. How good is it? A purely personal rating of its caliber as a game, and this is somehow 60% of the score. If 2 people completely disagree on the quality of a game, how do you reconcile that? There's like 30 people. There's 30 people, at least, who contributed to this list across their staff. Importance. How noteworthy is it? Its influence in other games in the wider world. That's 15%. The weirdest one is hotness. How exciting is it? And they describe this as its ability to retain a lively community that is excited and passionate about it. This is 15% of the top 100 score. This is so weird to me because what are you even talking about? How are you measuring hotness? How are you measuring community love for it? If a game has like 10 people, but they're like super champions of it, versus a game that has 1 million players, but they're all kind of meh on it, are those equal? Is one more hot than the other? What if it's just a single player game that, like, you know, it's something you play and then you're done with and you talk about it and that's sort of it? Is that, how do you even compare that to Minecraft that's had 15 years of mods and community support and all that? And then finally, playability. How playable is it? Which is how easy it is to get in the modern day. A measurement of how easy it is to get running on modern systems. This one is a little interesting because I don't know how heavily they count like emulation. That's like kind of I think that's kind of an important distinction. They never touch on emulation, because here's the thing. There's a lot of games amazing games that are released on systems that are like floppy disks that you literally can't play on modern hardware, that you have to emulate. You have to go download it. Sometimes the copyright is still active, so you do have to pirate them in order to play them. Like, I think to the regular person that doesn't matter, but if emulation is off the table, why even make the list? There is oh god, there's some awful figure that like 90% of all video games are not legally playable in like an easily accessible way, unless you're like buying them from a reseller or something like that. Like that's how bad preservation is. So if you take emulation off the table, why even make this list? You know, like anything, even DOS is like kind of dicey sometimes with whether or not that stuff's going to be available, even on something like GOG. So they never clarify it, and there is a, as with all of these lists, there is a severe recency bias. One of the underlying problems with lists like this is, I talked about the intent. What is the goal of this list? Is someone supposed to read this and think, these are games that I should play? Or are these games that I should know about? Or is it just to reinforce people's existing opinions about their favorite games? A more cynical person would say that this is for the purpose of getting clicks and ad revenue. Maybe you could say that, and it's on some level it is. I mean, they are running a business. But also, there was like a tremendous amount of work put into this, and I feel like if it was purely a business thing, they would have just thrown some garbage into a list, like they'd get ChatGPT to do it or some nonsense like that. This feels like they cared about making this happen. I mean, they said earlier, people made PowerPoint presentations to get some games onto the list to like sell them on putting the games on here. That's not something that you're doing just for the money. So there's something here, right? But what am I supposed to get out of this? So we look at the list. Let's look at the list here, right? Valheim, Guild Wars 2, City of Heroes Homecoming. I got to give that one to them, but I do love some City of Heroes. And it's also interesting because I mentioned emulation a second ago. This is the only, to my knowledge, the only community-run like resurrection server for a dead MMO that is officially supported by the original publisher. NCSoft is the only it's the only private server that has ever given them, as they see here, an official thumbs up. They have an agreement with them, and it's the only, spoiler, but it's the only MMO of this kind, something that's been shut down and resurrected, on the list. So maybe that contributes to the conspiracy theory. Although you should play City of Heroes. It's a baller game. So okay, there's games in here that like Dave the Diver's a little recent. I don't know if I'd put a game that recent on a top 100 list, but fine, that's me. You know, like a lot of these make sense. Dragon Age Origins, Left 4 Dead 2, Ghost of Tsushima. That's not the PlayStation game? That's on the top 100 PC games list. The whole rest of the list has this problem. It's like things that Death Stranding 89. There's so many, Destiny 2. There's so many games on here that are just like, yeah, they're technically on PC, but like the Resident Evil 4 remake is on this. Like what? Resident Evil 4? What? Maybe we have different definitions of what a PC game is. To me, I would say a PC game is anything that launched that is still exclusive to the platform, that is not available on consoles, or something that was released exclusively on PC and only later was ported over to other systems. That to me is like wait, hang on. The Master Chief Collection, Halo the Master Chief Collection at number 30? This is over First of all, this is over Deus Ex, which is 44. Second of all, these are Xbox games. What are you talking about? You're gonna call it Halo? Yes, by some technicality, they are PC games. They are playable on PC. I would never identify them as PC games. Okay, fine. They're like ethnically PC, but they're not culturally. You know what I mean? I don't see the point in making something called the top 100 PC games and putting Halo Reach on here. It seems ridiculous to me. Who is this list for, right? Like who is this list intended for? Not to mention like the absolute apples to oranges of like 16 Dwarf Fortress, 15 Red Dead 2. Sure? Okay, yeah, why not? Yeah, that's better. Look, Red Dead 2, let's see, Dwarf Fortress might have an 8.44 in quality, but Red Dead 2 is an 8.57 in quality. And while Dwarf Fortress, that's got a 9 in importance, and Red Dead's only got 8.29. However, Red Dead has the 6.48. Well, wait, Dwarf Fortress has a 7, playability 6.6. Oh, but Red Dead's got it beat out in playability, baby. That's really put it over the edge. What am I supposed to get out of this? I think, and I said this before about like the IGN top 100 games list. I think that these would be so much better, so much more helpful if each writer, each editor who contributed to this just made their own top 10 about games that they liked, or they focused on a certain genre, or made it way more genre focused. When you talk about the point, the intent, right? Why does PC Gamer write reviews of PC games? Why does anyone write reviews of anything, right? Like at a publication like this, you do it because you are the consumer advocate. You are trying to recommend people games that will, one, not waste their money, and two, not waste their time. Something that they will, the idea is that you will recommend a game to someone and they will go pick it up and they'll spend their cash on it and they will get some kind of enrichment out of their lives from like, even if it's just a little bit of distraction for a little bit, or it could be something really meaningful. That's the reason that you write reviews. It's not to be some kind of arbiter judge from heaven who is describing, who is dictating what is good and what is bad. You know, the idea is that this is supposed to help you. One of the most important things I think in a review is to give context. You know, there are people who you read up their opinions on things, you're like, this makes no sense, and then you find out what else they like and you're like, okay, this makes a lot of sense. If I could just read people's individualized lists, and it was just a pure opinion thing, and it was just them actually trying to think about what do they think are the best games and which ones would they recommend, that would be so much more helpful to just the average person, as opposed to this barely like barely mathematically objective just a flood of nonsense. Metal Gear Solid 3? What are you talking about? That's not a PC game. The other problem when you're making a list like this is that the people who, I think that the people who are making this, I don't want to like insult them. I'm sure they're fine. I'm sure they're decent writers at the very least, and that they do care about their job. And I don't think they phoned this in, right? I don't want to say that they phoned this in. I don't know that. I want to take it in good faith. But these people are not, their job is not really to know about video games. These people are not like historians. Their job is to play new releases, and I'm sure that they play stuff from the past. I'm sure that they have reasonably eclectic tastes in gaming in terms of styles and genres and time periods. But the ultimate truth is that there's just like a lot of recency bias and erasure of things. The oldest game on this list is from 1993. That's ridiculous. The oldest game is from 1993. Are you kidding me? You're not going to put a grab bag from like my golden age of EA. Mule, Archon, Murder on the Cinder Knife. You're not going to put anything like that, any like genuinely like really well-aged games that are super cool. You're gonna have an influence. You're gonna have a whole category for influence, and you're not gonna put a single wizardry game even in the top, like, you know, somewhere in the 100 range. There's multiple JRPGs on here. They didn't put the game that is responsible for JRPGs, which has a modern remake and everything like that. So like, it's not like it was just crushed on the playability metric. I don't want to be the guy who's like flaunting that I know all this stuff, and these professionals with like real jobs don't know what they're talking about. And that's not really like the impression I want to give off. It's just like, I do know all of this stuff, and it's kind of maddening to see a list like this. Just ignore it. Just ignore it. I would love, like, we need some kind of criterion collection for video games. I'm surprised that doesn't exist yet. You know, even if it was just like an unofficial thing that didn't correspond to any kind of like physical releases like the Criterion does, where they'll do re-releases of things on their list in the collection. You know, just some kind of like actual list to talk about, to compile the video games. There's more than enough, you know, that have stood the test of time, that are historically important, that are worth going back to. Because it pains me when there seems like such a lack of knowledge of the history. There is such a, I feel like, you know, there's in other mediums, maybe I'm totally, you know, off on this, but I feel like in other mediums which have longer histories, there is a better understanding of what the important works are than there are with video games. And I think that's kind of a challenge that we, as people who care about games as a medium, sort of have to address. You know, like, everyone knows King Kong, everyone knows Citizen Kane, but there are just super fun. No one knows about Mule. That's like one of the most important games ever made, and it's great. It's so much fun. And in my own way, I that's kind of what I try to do, is I try to actually spotlight some of that stuff on places like my main channel, and the historical things that are like historically important. So yeah, it's disappointed to see a list like this. I don't even want to get into the, like, I could get into the weeds of judging the placements of every single thing on this list. But I don't really see how helpful that is, because I feel like you can just dismiss it out of turn just for how nonsensical the criteria is, and how just dumb it is to be putting so many games like these back to back against each other. Like Doom versus MGS3, you know, Doom versus Stardew Valley. Stardew Valley's better. What am I supposed to get out of this? I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but it is a very long list. I forgot Persona 5 was on here. I forgot it's not a PC. Oh, let's see, the top five are Persona 5, Minecraft, Elden Ring, Disco Elysium, and Baldur's Gate 3. Here's another thing. This isn't even like a super like crucial point, but with on the recency bias thing, I don't feel comfortable. If I was making a list like this, I would not want to put anything from like the last 5 years on it. I feel like that's just too recent. Maybe even 10 years. It feels too recent. Anything from like 2014, that feels like too soon for a list like this. Maybe that's just me talking. Something from last year. The only one I even kind of understand is Disco Elysium. Like, okay, I get that one. But Baldur's Gate 3, the game from last year, like, how many games have come out? There was a time, I remember, when the best game in the world was BioShock Infinite. And then 5 years later, everyone turned around and told me actually it sucked. I never played it. It was just kind of a whiplash to see the way that game the sentiment on that game turned around. I don't know if it'll happen with Baldur's Gate 3, but like, what if? Sometimes you should maybe like let things sit for a little bit before there's like a critical reevaluation. Maybe in 5 years, this game is everyone's gonna realize this game sucks or something. It's just an example. Baldur's Gate 3 seems very good. I haven't played it because I'm a sham. Oh, remember about how I talked about, the criteria and its relationship to emulation? Like, okay, if we're just going to be putting any game that you can play on a PC on here, what's stopping you from just making this an overall games of all time list and just including, oh yeah, well, you can emulate it. And there is a personal pick segment at the bottom where each editor, each contributor to the list gives just one game that they would recommend that was not on the list. And yeah, the second dude is just Majora's Mask on an emulator. Fuck it, why not? If I was going to give any kind of a closing thought to this, I would say, stop doing lists like these. Rethink why you're even doing them in the first place. We need to do a better job at actually being like art historians for this medium, because I think when you make a list of the top 100 PC games and the oldest game on it is from 1993, I think that's like a little embarrassing. And third, you should go play City of Heroes. Also, Vampire Survivors is somewhere on this list, and you should play that too. So that's all I had to say about that. You can check out my main channel and my Patreon and my podcast and all the rest of the garbage I spew out on the internet way too often. Bye.